Hi guys, welcome back to Snakes and Adders Advanced Series. Today we're going to be having a look at the Panther Chameleon, or Furcifer pardalis. First described by Georges Cuvier in 1829, it then went through a number of taxonomic changes. They included Cameleo pardalis by Cuvier in 1829, Cameleo aeta by Lessing in 1832, Cyniasaura pardalis by Gray in 1865, Cameleo guntheri by Boulanger in 1888, Chameleon longicorda by Gunther in 1891, Chameleon axillaris by Werner in 1899. This seems to have been a hotbed, the back end of the 1800s, the last sort of 12-15 years, loads of changes taking place. Chameleon Cremphi by Chabanord in 1923, Chameleon Niger by Dumeril and Bibron in 1836, and Chameleon pardalis by Werner in 1911. They were then reclassified into the genus Furcifer, which means forked feet, where the feet are fused into 3 and then 2 toes, and this makes them superb for gripping thin branches. There is a number of localities that exist within the hobby. These include, just to list a few, Nosy B, Nosy Mitsio, Nosy Farley, Amberlobi, Ambanja Sambava, and Karami, and Kifi and Tamatavi, amongst others. Each has its own specific colour signature, mixing up oranges, reds, blues and greens to give basically what is one of the most gorgeous chameleons, its colour palette. These things really do pop. Weight and size, the boys are sexually dimorphic, so they're far bigger, far more colourful. The adult mature size for a male is between 45 and 50 centimetres, with a weight between 140 and 200 grams. A female, conversely, is between 35 and 40 centimetres and between 60 and 110 grams. So what we also need to look at is the ridge on the nose of the males, which is far more pronounced, and it gives a crest form, and this is one of our identifying markers. So this again is our sexual dimorphism. Growth rate is exponential. The animals are full grown and potentially sexually mature before their first birthday. As well as that, females are incredibly prolific, producing up to 40 eggs per litter. Unfortunately, this takes a massive toll on the bodies of the females and reduces lifespan quite considerably, where lifespan could be anything from 1.5 to 3.5 years. Generally, they'll lay 4 or 5 litters of eggs and that's them done. They're burnt out. Laying 40 eggs at only 60 grams, you can imagine the eggs are tiny. This gives way for them needing a long incubation period to be able to swell and develop embryos and neonates, conversely, inside. So a 200-day plus incubation. So we need to be on top of our eggs to make sure that we don't get any rot or they don't become too dry or any of these other issues, adding to the complexity of breeding the species. Males are longer lived at between 5 and 7 years, and obviously then as a view in the hobby that the males are the easiest sex to maintain because we don't have any of the complications with with egg laying, or the females will produce eggs regardless of whether a boy's present, and infertile eggs and egg binding or discosia is probably one of the most prevalent killers of female chameleons. So yes, the boys are definitely a far easier consideration because of this. Obviously they're arboreal, they like to climb. Now chameleons operate using crypsis and camouflage, and they like to be able to hide in plain sight. They potentially think that they're invisible, so we need to make sure that our tank is really filled up with lots of foliage, whether real or fake. If you want to use live plants, things like pothos, ficus and fatsia, which are strong structural plants with larger leaves, and they will put up with the weight of the chameleon climbing on them without just falling apart. But yes, loads and loads of plants. This will offer us and afford us shaded areas away from the UV light, as research suggests now that we should have areas of high UV output, and then they can move away to far shaded areas, the same way that they can either bask underneath the heat light or move away. With regards to temperature, they're not massive fans of huge temperature, and whilst the basking area in a localized specific area might be 32 to 34 degrees Celsius, they seem to prefer being between 28 and 30 degrees, and at night they can drop to between sort of 22 and 24 Celsius. On the market is a huge amount of mesh vivariums. Now, in a professional setup where we have a room full of enclosures, these are marvellous. In fact, they can't be beaten because they help us achieve two variables which are notoriously difficult to balance out: air airflow versus humidity. If we have a room full of mesh tanks and plants and water sources, the humidity and the airflow is still marvellous. But in a domestic setting where this potentially is the only tank within a room, this is where the mesh tanks fall down, because the rooms generally are far cooler, and it's then harder to balance out the humidity and temperature and airflow requirements. Stagnant air or airflow that's too stifled will lead to respiratory infections. Air that's too cool will lead to respiratory infections. We're bad as burnt scolded. So a lot of people use the glass tanks, which have got the mesh lids, which allows the good airflow, and there's also usually a front vent beneath the opening glass doors, which allows some convection and airflow to take place, whilst trying to be able to maintain a certain amount of heat and humidity in there without rotting, which is inevitable with a wooden tank, or with the mesh tanks potentially the air just escapes immediately. There's no gradient to speak of whatsoever. Hello, are you on the move again? Go on then, you can have a look. You're alright. So when it comes to water sources, they don't really see standing water sources particularly well, and if we can agitate the surface either through an air stone so that the water bubbles and they can then see the movement that way, or a lot of people employ the use of drippers where that will drip onto one of the large structural leaves and they can then lick at this to be able to drink and hydrate themselves. The humidity can come in the form of spraying, but a lot of the more advanced keepers argue that spraying can help skin stick to them, and they much prefer the idea of misting, but this involves mist kings and other systems which are more complex to set up and certainly more expensive. So from an access point of view, yes, spraying, but you may long term want to move yourself onto maybe one of these automated electronic misting systems. As far as territoriality and temperament goes, panthers are one of the more relaxed chameleons. That said, we do not necessarily recommend that we're going to make a habit of handling our chameleon regularly. This is an animal that relies almost totally on camouflage, so it does seem to fry their circuit slightly when you just go in and pick them up. It's like, how did they find me? Oh my god. So yes, it's easy to stress them out. For that reason, this is why we mark them up between intermediate and advanced. We certainly want people to have done masses of research and know what they're taking on. This is complex from a breeding perspective. It has complications with a shortened lifespan, so we want to make sure that we get everything right and nothing's really left to chance. This is merely just scratching the surface and would no way on any planet be deemed enough research for you. If I had to make a recommendation about where to go, there is a Facebook group called the Chameleon Enthusiasts. If you join them, I have joined myself, and I have found it to be very, very supportive, very much trying to push forward the husbandry, but even people maybe that have got maybe, let's call it substandard care, we're not flaming people, we're trying to help them, and they're very much leading people with a carrot rather than whipping them with a stick. So I am a very big fan of that group. So that's the Chameleon Enthusiasts on Facebook. Make sure you do your research, really go to town. Food and feeding, they're insectivorous, they will take good sized prey, they have excellent appetites, their growth rate is superb. Let's make sure that we've gut loaded our food correctly on high quality veg, and then also that we're supplementing this diet with calcium and multivitamin powders, although there is research suggesting now we should stay away from the artificial or synthetic forms of vitamin D3, so check the makeup of your multivitamin blends to see if we can try and avoid that and still provide the rest of the spectrum, maybe without the vitamin D3. I hope you enjoyed that. Keep doing your research. Do not take chameleons lightly. Do not take panthers lightly. These are not a cheap chameleon, so you can expect to pay really quite large money for the chameleon itself, and probably potentially even double that to set your tank up properly and to make it the spectacle that it needs to be. These are easily one of the most attractive lizards money can buy, and you know, I absolutely adore them, but they're not for everybody, and they're a very involved pet lizard. So visit the website www.snakesnadders.co.uk, and from me and Paul at Snakes Nadders, peace. You're very well behaved, aren't you? Eh?